Welcome to part 2 of our piece on what makes a successful football nation. We will start where we left off, discussing how poverty can actually help to create top-level footballers. One of the main reasons why poverty can actually help a young footballer is that it may be the only thing that can drive them to see football as a way out. If you aren't in poverty, then you cannot escape poverty, and therefore the idea of a career in football may not be a motivator. However, a child who lives in poor conditions and isn't likely to receive a great education, or perhaps has no expectations that they will even have an education, can see football as the best option in order to improve their life. This can drive them to work harder and become more dedicated to the sport, as they see it as a potential path to a better future, or perhaps the only path in many cases. Quite unfortunately, children may see football or crime as their only viable options to earn money. This may sound extreme, but in the likes of Asia, Africa, or South America, it is the norm for many youths. Poverty can also lead to resourcefulness. Children growing up in poverty may have to find ways to play and practice football with limited resources. This can help them to develop unique skills and techniques that set them apart from other players from more affluent backgrounds. They are street footballers. Street footballers have to be fast, strong, and tough. Rich kids on a fancy new pitch don't need to worry about staying up so they don't hit the hard ground. Pelé famously said that the first time he fell on the street, he knew he had to stay up. Desperation to avoid bad circumstances can create a hunger in young players that affluent nations or children will find more difficult to accrue. That is why so many of the best footballers ever grew up playing on the streets in very low-income households. They made it because they saw it as the only way. Argentina is a good example of a poor nation that has produced amazing football players. Despite the country's economic struggles, Argentine football has a rich history of this and has produced many of the world's greatest players like Maradona and Messi, who famously were working class boys who in the end saw football as a way to a better future. Furthermore, street football is a common form of the game in many poor areas of Argentina, and as discussed, it can help to develop players' technical skills and creativity. Yes, the country also has a strong football tradition and a winning mentality, but as discussed, when mixed with the fact that thousands or even millions of children are desperate to become footballers and skip school every day to hone their skills, you can bet your life that some amazing footballers are going to emerge. Lastly, regarding Argentina, despite their economic struggles, the country has a good infrastructure for developing young players and provides resources for the national team to compete at the highest level. Like we previously mentioned, it's not one of our 5 factors that wins World Cups, it's a healthy mix of all. This country's football federation has invested in the game in Argentina, and this is a key factor in their recent success too. To compare, we know that African nations have incredible talent because players like Mane, Salah, Drogba, and Samuel Eto'o always pop up. But they are lacking football federations with enough money to invest in wider youth football in the country. This way, they would sustain great systems where whole generations could flourish together. Let's hope Morocco is the first big step in that trend changing. In conclusion, poverty can play a role in the development of great football players. In poor nations, children see football as a way to escape poverty and improve their lives, which can make them desperate and hungry to feed their families and relieve their parents of financial burdens by signing a contract as a professional footballer. A strong domestic league is another factor in the development and success of a national team. A strong domestic league helps to develop and attract talented young players, and it also serves to provide a suitable environment for them to improve their skills and compete at a high level. This way, they have an environment in which they can improve and they can grow. By providing a high level of competition, a strong domestic league can help to improve the overall level of the players in a country. A youngster coming through the ranks as a teenager in Brazil will face fierce competition in youth football. Yes, a top European club may be the ultimate goal, but without such great competition in their own country, the players that end up in Real Madrid would never be able to develop. This is another instance where a Brazil can be compared to an African nation. Okay, Brazil may have the biggest football culture on earth, but African nations are also in love with football. African nations have nowhere near the levels of national competition that Brazil has though, and this is the problem, at youth and senior level. This means it is harder to find the next Mo Salah, whereas every year dozens of Brazilian wonder kids are bursting on to the European scene. A strong domestic league provides a suitable environment for players to improve their skills and compete at the highest level as soon as they are physically able. The ability to do so in their own country, in their own language, is also a big plus. Take a super talented youth player from Asia. To develop in a system in Europe, they have to move continents, meaning they have to develop in a system where the language and culture is completely foreign to them. These personal challenges can make it much harder for a player to succeed, so it is crucial that youth players have the ability to grow and to thrive in their own country. Not many nations can provide that. Globalization means immigration is more common than ever before, whether it's ongoing global crisis or wars, meaning many refugees have had to search for better homes, or simply because the world has been becoming smaller and people have now travelled to live and work abroad with ease for more than a generation. Immigration has affected national populations immensely, some a lot more than others in fact, and we think this has had a massive impact on those nations' respective football teams. Immigration can play a significant role in helping international football teams be more successful. The influx of new players and cultures can bring new skills, techniques and physicality, as well as increasing the depth and diversity of the player pool in a country. This can help to improve the overall level of the national team and increase the chances of success in international competition. France is a good example of a team that has benefited from immigration in their success. The French national team has a diverse group of players from different backgrounds and cultures, which has helped to bring diversity and different playing styles to the team. The French side that has been so successful of late has been full of first or second generation African immigrants. France have been able to mix the incredible athletic ability and skill of African players with the wealth of French clubs and their coaching resources to create incredible international teams. They have reached 4 out of the last 7 World Cup finals. In the previous 15 tournaments, they never reached a final, and back then they didn't benefit from nearly as much immigration, so it really does make sense. In 1998, Zinedine Zidane, who is as Algerian as he is French, was the talisman of the World Cup winning side. The 2018 World Cup winning French side was full of players with African roots, from Mbappe to Kante and Pogba to Coman. France's levels of immigration have had a clear impact on their team in recent years, and obviously for the better. Switzerland is another interesting example of how immigration can have a massive impact on a team. For decades now, Switzerland has welcomed many immigrants and refugees of war, and now it has an international side that is massively successful, especially for the relative size of the country. Switzerland has benefited from immigration from Africa and the Balkan nations to produce players like Xhaka, Shaqiri and Embolo. That means Switzerland are now a regular fixture in the knockout rounds of major tournaments, whereas neighbouring Austria, for example, don't have quite as much immigration historically and haven't been nearly as successful on the pitch. Ironically, the recent shining light for Austrian football has been David Alaba, the best player of a generation by far. He has African and Filipino parents. Germany has benefited from a lot of African and Turkish immigration. World Cup winning stars like Khedira and Özil are both of Turkish descent, as is İlkay Gündoğan, so it's fairly obvious that immigration can be a great thing for an international team. Immigrants tend to arrive into the working classes of these more developed countries, creating at times the perfect mix of desire to succeed in football and perfect resources and opportunities to do so. France is of course the perfect example of how this mixture can work so spectacularly for a country's international football prowess. With that, we'll conclude that France is the closest nation to getting the perfect mix for a fabulous international team. They have a massive immigrant population and they have a polarised society where a lot of young people and a lot of young immigrants see football as their biggest opportunity to succeed. However, what France also has in its favour is wealth. Obviously one of the top Western economies, France has amazing infrastructure, especially in football, at a local and national level, and its football heritage means that this infrastructure is here to stay and will always be invested in. France has a great youth system and domestic leagues for players to compete, learn and grow in. Now with the World Cup titles of 98 and 2018, many children will grow up utterly inspired by French football and thinking only of their nation as one of football's elite. They won't even consider other sports and they will take to the streets to become the next Kylian Mbappe. Argentina have football heritage in abundance, but they don't have the infrastructure and football system, nor the immigration that France has. In 2022, that didn't matter, but as things change in football, this might put them at a future disadvantage. Countries like Brazil, England, and the Netherlands will always have a strong mix and have strong international teams. And then certain nations spring to mind that might have 4 out of the 5 but be severely lacking in one aspect. The US and China are global superpowers, but they are extremely lacking in football heritage and haven't come close to competing for a major title. Nations like Colombia and Mexico don't have great football infrastructure or amazing domestic leagues, and other could-be contenders like the African nations have been burdened by poverty and unable to harvest their young talent to its full potential, or at least not yet. With all of this in mind, we believe France will be the strongest power in world football in the coming decades, that the African nations will improve, and finally, the countries lacking in immigration or football heritage might just be left behind. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below.